it's the journey of an entrepreneur. Because a lot of people, very much like what you do here, a lot of people don't always start in the place where they land. You know, it's a set of circumstances. It's going through the left door when you're meant to go through the right door. It's going on the tube when you're meant to go on the train, and then you bump into somebody and so on. You know, it's like when, meeting you. We both end up in the same situation. And then obviously here we are X amount of time forward on.
Hey guys, I would like to welcome Clayton to Quit and Switch. Clayton, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad myself. Thank you very much. So just for you Quit and Switches out there, Clayton Coke. Is it Clayton Coke or Clayton Coke?
No, Clayton M Coke, that's it.
Clayton M Coke. All right, so we have to make sure that the M is in there. Clayton M Coke, guys. So Clayton M Coke, he is the founder of PRMS Limited. They train businesses in debt prevention, and he's also the host of the Cashflow Show podcast. Clayton, it's great to have you on board finally on Quit and Switch. We bumped into each other at the podcast show a few weeks ago.
Indeed, that was excellent. It was a pleasure meeting you. It was a great couple of days, but afterwards I was just on my knees. It was a lot. It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was quite overwhelming. I think they need to make it 3 days, or at least provide like maybe the recordings to us or something like that.
Yeah,
Because it's quite overwhelming.
it is. It is. It's quite a. It's fascinating. It's interesting, but there is a lot going on at the same time, and everybody wants. Oh, did you go to this event? Did you go to that end? Did you do this?
Yeah,
Did you do that? And you can't meet everybody. You can't meet everybody.
exactly. You can't meet everybody. That's the insane thing about it. And I don't want to rant, but they need to provide the recordings. If they provide the recordings to people as well, then that would definitely help ease the
I think
pressure
so.
of having to go to certain events. Because sometimes you're talking to someone, you're having a good conversation, but then at the same time, you want to go to a workshop or an event and
Yes.
or a talk, and you don't want to miss out on the talk. At the same time, you don't want to leave this great conversation you're having. So you're in like a catch-22, like you're in this kind of trap. So, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Kind of thing. So anyway, that's for the podcast show. If you're listening, you know what to do.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, you know what to do. So anyway, let's crack on with the show. So Clayton, I'd like you to tell us about your quit and switch journey very quickly. So tell us about your business in debt recovery and a little bit about your past. I believe you did a little bit in radio, if I'm correct. I think you've done a little bit of.
Not so much in radio.
Okay.
I tell you, my past extends quite a little bit back. At the end of the day, I'm the founder of PRMS Limited, which is a late payment debt recovery company based in the City of London. We work with businesses, usually SME businesses, and businesses that tend to deal with professional services, architects, doctors, lawyers, etc., people who are really good at running their business, but when it comes to sitting down and looking at the cash flow, at looking at how they're getting paid and how the business is working, they haven't got time for that. If you're an architect, you're looking for the latest contract. If you're a doctor, you're seeing the latest patient. If you're a lawyer, you're looking for the next case. And the idea is that you have to sit down and deal with money that hasn't come in after you've provided a service. Is
Yeah.
hard work. So our job is to alleviate businesses from that. So we are in our 21st year. And, that's one of the things I'm very, very proud of, because when most businesses usually don't last a couple of years, it's fantastic to still be going after that period of time. But I didn't always necessarily work in debt recovery, and I didn't necessarily wasn't always a business owner. My original thing started off from, a long time ago. I don't want to age myself. But let's put it this way. Before I became a debt recovery specialist, I was a lawyer. And I started off back in the day, and I was what they call an outdoor clerk, which is like a runner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you would go and you would deliver things to court, You would collect things, you would know your way around, they'd make you deliver stuff, and you do these things called completions. And a completion was like they would give you the money for a property exchange or property purchase along with the document, and you had to go along. They gave you the briefcase, the office briefcase, which is a big thing. And you went along to the solicitor's office, you gave them the papers, and you gave them the check. It was a banker's draft. You had to go to a special place to get that. And it was a way of teaching you how to move around the court system and how to move around the legal system. So I did that for a couple of years when I was much younger after I'd left school. And then I basically went to the civil service for a while. I worked in the divorce registry, which was a very interesting place to be in. And from then, I then basically got a job as a legal exec, and I went to work for Hackney Council. And that was an interesting time. The same way that, for example, Croydon has had massive problems in terms of bankruptcy and the council literally going bankrupt. That was Hackney 20, 30 years ago.
Wow.
They were in a mess, absolute mess.
Wow.
It was terrible. It was really, really, really bad. And the council was about to go bankrupt. And I remember, you talk about quit and switch, and you talk about the journey. Everybody has that pinnacle moment. And I think they call the thing is the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And in the hero's journey, there's the point at which you cannot go back.
Mm.
And that point for me was when we were working for Hackney Council, and there were a lot of Black people, African and African Caribbean people working in Hackney Council at that time. And they said, go over to the town hall. So we all marched over to the town hall, and they said, there's a bit of a problem. And we said, okay, you might not get paid this month.
Wow.
Now, I come from a background of parents saying, go and work for central government, go and work for local government. You'll always have a job. Go and work in the bank. You know, imagine you'd be told, go and work in the bank 30 years ago. And what do you think what's happened to the banking system now? Yeah, it hasn't worked out quite like what your parents told you that it was going to work out. So
Yeah.
they then said, you know, you might not get paid. And to me, this was a complete and utter shock. I'm thinking, what do you mean I might not get paid? This is local government. You know, central government provides the money. But I realized that that wasn't the case. And I thought, this job security business, it isn't what I thought it was going to be. So from that point, my mind was set to a certain extent that at some point I needed to get out of the game there and needed to be in a position where I could control my own destiny.
That's quite interesting. I want to double tap on you mentioning that, you know, you are working in a job where they said you might not get paid at the end of the month. Is that where the idea to go into debt prevention came? Because it's like, I want to always make sure I get paid, you know, and I always want to make sure that people who own money are going to always get paid. So let me go into this kind of business.
Interesting.
Am I right? Am I wrong?
No, you're not necessarily wrong, but it actually occurs a bit later on. So you're a bit ahead of the journey there, because what happened is that I came to the conclusion that working in local authority was never going to be what I thought it was going to be. It was going to be steady to a certain extent, but to me that was too scary. So in the end, I decided, okay, let me see if I can leave. Let me see if I can get out of the game. And very much like in that scene in The Godfather, where the guy goes, you know, I've been trying to get out of the game for so long, but they just keep pulling me back in. Every time I
haven't
went
seen
through,
that film yet.
that's The Godfather 3. If you see that film, you'll see the anxiety that he has because he's trying to get out of the gangster business, but he can't because he's completely locked in. And that was me to a certain extent. I couldn't get out of law and maybe law plus local authority. And I was really sort of trapped in that thing. So I said, right, I'm going to get something else. I don't care what it is. I just need to just move away from those circumstances. In the end, I decided, right, okay, things are getting a bit bad. I'm getting a bit short of money now. I need to maybe get a locum job or a temporary job. So I took something, signed up with some other things, and said it doesn't matter what it is. And I went to an agency one time, and they were being a bit manipulative, and they said to me, "How much will you work for?" And I'm thinking, I said, "Listen, I just want to get some money coming in." So I got a job in the mailroom of a firm of solicitors. And then they said, "Oh, what did you do before?" And I said, "I was a legal exec." And I said, "Hold on, shouldn't you be upstairs?" And it was kind of like, yeah, but I've signed up to do this. This is the job that I've signed up. So it's no point in me coming up into this office and saying, I demand to be upstairs because that's what I did in my last job. I'm doing this to get some money ticking up. I didn't last very long there because other jobs came in. And one of the things that came in was I got a call from an agency and they said, "Oh, we've got this job." And I said, "Okay." They said, "It's in Hatfield." Hatfield, where's that, man? I'm from South London, so as far as I'm concerned, Hatfield, that sounds like country to me. So I then basically get at this the map. The once upon a time, the tube maps used to have not just the tube, but it used to have the sort of Greater London and sort of counties area. And I saw Hatford, and it was in Hertfordshire. The Shires, that to me is that's country. So I said,
Yeah.
okay, and they said, "We've got this job. It's great, It's debt recovery." Now I've done bits and pieces of debt recovery, but it wasn't pure debt recovery. So I thought, okay. So they said, "Well, they need some help. Would you like to try it for 3 months?" And I thought, well, it's more money than the post room, so let's go along and try it. So they said, Here's a desk, here's a chair, here's a phone, here's the filing cabinets with all the debts in. Off you go." So I said, okay. And I like a challenge like that because at the end of the day, I thought I could get into this. So I started going through it. I started getting a system together. I started using all the skills that I'd had previously in all the other roles because a lot of the cases weren't being taken to court. Nobody was pursuing people. It was a nursing agency, but nobody was collecting the money from the nurses. Nobody was collecting the money from the doctors. So doctors were going in, they were getting paid by the agency, but the agency wasn't getting paid by the client or the patient. So it was a big palaver. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, I stayed there for 18 months.
Not bad.
So they then said, "We've got a bit of a problem." And I thought, here we go again. But no, it's not bad. But the fact is that there's nothing else for you to do. You've done it all. You've
It's
cleared the
finished.
debt.
You
You're
finished the
finished.
game.
You finished the game. Yeah, level, whatever it is, level 99. So I thought, okay, fair enough. But it showed me that I could come in and do something, and it gave me the next direction of where I wanted to be. So I then said, well, okay, let's start a company. So I started PRMS, and that was the start of that particular journey.
Wow. Fantastic. Wow. Who never I bet you never thought you would get into that industry, and here you are, X amount of years later.
Yeah,
It's for, yeah. What a journey. What a journey. What a journey. And it's quite interesting how you're on a particular path, and by accident you end up on a different path, and it's just the way life works sometimes. And it seems that you found something that was resonating with your skills, your talents, your experiences, and you, you the first position that you had completely killed it. Let me go and do my own thing. So plaudits to
exactly.
you, Clayton. Very much plaudits to you. And how
Thank
did the
you.
podcasting came about? So of course you start off as a lawyer, and then working in mail rooms, and then of course you made a transition into starting your own debt prevention company, and then podcasting as well. So tell us about the podcasting, how you got into that as well.
You see, a lot of that's accident, and everything is. It seems like an accident, but it's also a gradual progression because ultimately, I did in terms of the PRMS business, in terms of late payments and debt recovery. I found that one of the things that was intriguing about that situation was people were uncomfortable. People are very uncomfortable about talking about money. I realized that very early on that when when you're in a business and you're working with a business, but when you're going out to network, people are uncomfortable. And, I noticed that I would talk to people and say, hi, my name's Clayton. I run a debt recovery company. And people sometimes would walk off, or they would dive into the toilet, or they would find any excuse not to have to talk about it and have to deal with it. And I thought, this is not good. There's, people think I'm a bad person and I'm actually trying to help them. So it became a bit of a nightmare, but I still carried on networking and I improved my skills as a networker. And I still network very heavily now. I mean,
Oh, you're on the
that's
podcast show, so of course, yeah.
exactly. So
You're everywhere, man. You're everywhere, man.
I tried to be, but I think what taught me, I guess after a while, I realized that physically I couldn't be anywhere or be everywhere, but what I could be is I could present a side of me that people wouldn't normally expect. Now, you see, the thing is, when I turned up to places, people expected me, and they said, "Oh, Clayton M Coke," and these guys turned up. And I'll tell you a true story. A gentleman once saw me going to be on the same event as him, and he said to himself, "Oh, he saw me and he saw my photo. I saw his photo. And then when we actually got to the networking event, he said to me, oh, you're the debt collector guy." And I said, yeah. And then he said, oh, I didn't think I'd have much to say to you. And it gave me the perception as if to say, well, you made an assumption that because I deal with debt recovery and debt collection, that I'm going to be some type of Neanderthal and I can't express myself and I can't engage in intelligent conversation. So, that's the impression that he gave me. Maybe I took it too seriously. I couldn't tell you. But for me, it was important that I express how I am as an individual and that I'm not defined by the work that I do. So I've always had an interest in music. I've always had an interest in audio. So therefore, I've always had an interest in recording. And the idea that, this podcasting came about, I thought, oh, podcasting, this is like having your own radio station, isn't it? And I'm very much for empowerment. And as a black man, I think that I don't see many areas where black men have a certain level of empowerment or a certain level of freedom as far as broadcasting or the press is concerned. So therefore, I thought, well, hold on. I can do things in a way that are befitting and businesslike, and then share that with people who might not necessarily initially want to be engaged, but start to think, this guy, he's starting to make some sense. So I just decided, right, I'm going to do a podcast. I didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue. I didn't know anything about having a host provider. I didn't know anything about, analytics. I knew nothing, but I knew about recording. So I did this recording. I got an iPhone and I got an attachment to the iPhone. I sat it down with the person who was my guest. My first guests were Lisa Newton and another lady called Bella, who runs Think Tenacity. And those were the first two guests that I had, and they were willing to come along. Most people didn't know what a podcast was, straight up. Most people just didn't know what it was. But they
When did
sat
you
down
start? When did you start, Clayton?
approximately about 7 years ago.
Okay, so the Cashflow Show has been running for some time, or was
Yeah,
it a
it's been
different
running for
podcast that
some
you had at the
time.
time?
I mean, we've had
Okay.
some breaks in between, but it's been running for some time. But I think the first 2 years really kind of harmed me because I put it on SoundCloud thinking that's where you put podcasts.
I've been there before. That's my first. That
So,
was the first place I uploaded my podcast, SoundCloud,
yeah.
and then I realized, you did have to pay separately to get onto the Apples and the Spotify's of this world.
And I realized that's the same journey. I realized afterwards, hold on, I'm getting no listeners here. I'm directing people, but I'm not getting anywhere. And then I realized that you need to give this thing to Apple. You need to register this thing, and so that all the other search engines can get it, and all the other podcast host providers. And that's effectively when my journey then started. And a lot of people said to me, "Oh, why do you call it the Cashflow Show? Do you sit around talking about money?" And that is what I didn't want to talk about. I didn't want to talk about money, money all the time. Money comes into the conversation, but I want to
Mhm.
talk about the journey of my host. No, sorry. I want to talk about the journey of my guest. And as a host, my job is to facilitate that.
Okay, so that's how you came up with. So how you came up with the name of the Cashflow Show? Um, yeah, actually, how did you come up with the name? You didn't actually mention that.
Because the most important thing to any business is cash flow.
Okay.
Every business dies without cash flow. It doesn't matter, if Apple starts having a problem with cash flow tomorrow, its business will die.
Hmm.
You never die as a business by having too much money. People say, "Oh, we grew too quickly." No, you didn't manage quickly enough. But people,
Mm.
you don't see Tim Cook at Apple saying, "Boy, we got so much problems. We're making so much money, man. We just, we're going to have to shut down." That's never the problem. It's most small businesses. It's very much a feast and famine situation, and getting regular cash flow is the hardest thing. That's why so many businesses are on subscriptions now,
Absolutely, it's
because
getting the
they
cash flow in.
to get that cash flow, to keep it coming in again and again and again. Because by having that regular subscription, you got 100 subscriptions or 100 subscribers all paying £1 each. You're getting £100 every month.
Hmm.
Unless
Hmm.
somebody decides to drop out for a reason, you're not going to lose all the 100 in one fell swoop. You're going to lose one, two, five, maybe 10. So roughly, give or take a swing of 10 to the left or 10 to the right, what you're getting in.
Can we call you if our subscriptions cancel to chase them down to pay?
You can do so, but the thing is, at the end of the day, you've got to work out whether it's cost effective, and that's the key thing. As a
Churn is
business,
part of your business, I suppose.
well, you see, it's like with anything. It's all about the type of clients you have, because sometimes people say, "Oh, I've got this client, but they pay me every 6 months." To me, that's not a client. That's a joker. Because the fact is, that's not your client. Because number one, they don't respect what you do, and number two, they don't put that respect into monetary value. So if you're waiting 6 months to get paid, you're with the wrong people.
Mm. Mm. Did you hear that, Quentin Switches? You're with the wrong people if you're waiting 6 months to get paid. Make sure you're getting
Yeah,
paid every month. Make sure there's cash flow.
yeah,
I'm really
and
enjoying
even
this conversation.
good, and I hope that's helpful. Because another thing I would add to that is, if you've got debts or invoices outstanding for over 90 days and you haven't been paid, you have a problem.
Mm.
Simplest, easiest tip, if you've got 10 invoices and half of them are over 90 days, that's the half you got the problem with.
Mm. Coming from a debt prevention specialist. I hope you guys heard that. Hope you guys caught that. I'm really enjoying this conversation so far, Clayton. Just let our listeners know. For today's show notes, transcripts, references, and nuggets and links, please head over to www.quitandSwitch.co/Clayton Coke. That's ClaytonCoke. All right. Now let's continue on with the show. So Clayton, I've really enjoyed your story about how you started the Cashflow Show podcast. You mentioned you mentioned you were talking about your first couple of guests, which helped to kind of put you in this journey. Are there any memorable conversations that you've had on the show and any interesting stories, whether it's speaking to a guest or maybe testimonies of a listener or a guest maybe getting some kind of benefit on the back of the podcast that you'd like to share?
Phew, blimey.
Top of
It's
mind,
okay.
anything top of mind.
I'll give you one to start off with.
That's
I
enough.
had a lady on the show called Joanna Toch. And Joanna is a barrister and a lawyer who runs the Family Law Cafe. And that was one of the most interesting people to have. I mean, everybody's interesting and everybody has a particular angle to bring to the show. But I think what I try to do is I try to get people who have an interesting point of view, who have an interesting subject that I can say to people, you've learned something from this. Now, the
Mm,
problem is relationships are a very, very complex area. And when relationships break down, a lot of people don't understand how they work. and having somebody on the show. We'd already had Michelle Camacho, who was also a family lawyer, on beforehand. So we've tried to have sort of a lawyer, a barrister. Now the next person that needs in the sequence is a divorce coach. So we got all these people. So what I tried to do is link things together. Joanna was
Nice.
interesting because people reveal things to you, and you find in your shows the same thing. She revealed to me that she was an Olympic rower. I didn't know this at all, so that was a very much a surprise. Oh, I didn't realize that you were an Olympic rower. But she also, sometimes you can be from very, very different backgrounds and very, very different people, but all influenced by the same thing. I knew that I wanted to be in law when I was 9 years old. So I knew then that I wanted to be somewhere in that industry, in that arena. But it's quite interesting that she and I were watching exactly the same program at the same time, and it both influenced us to get involved in law.
Wow. What are the odds, huh?
But then a couple of guests afterwards, it happened about 2 or 3 times. Everybody had watched that same program, and the program was called Crown Court. Used to be on many, 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 many years ago. Many
What
years
channel
ago.
was this on the UK?
Oh my God, this was ITV, and this is
Really?
in the 70s.
Wow.
But it was very, very influential. It literally, what it was a crown court trial set over 5 days,
Mm,
and everything was acted, but the story was true, and the jury was a real jury.
that's
Uh, uh,
insane.
yeah, 12 people picked out. So Monday giving evidence, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday it was the verdict.
That's insane.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
insane.
that was, but it was an incredibly influential thing. So things like that happened, and then we, we've. I think the guests when they come on, what they realize is that it's not about me as an individual. It's about them. What's their story? And I try and find elements in their story that I want to share with the audience. And I want people to see how good these people are. I want people to see how great these people are, what they can do for them, what they know. Those are the things that are important for me.
That's amazing, Clayton. And I mean, it does make sense now that why you've called it the cash flow show, because not necessarily is because of cash, not because necessarily going to talk about money and cash flow, but it's because you're talking to small, medium businesses, SMEs who need cash flow, right?
Yeah,
We all need cash flow, and I think it's a nice, catchy name. It's a nice hook to get listeners in. But when listeners actually listen to it, okay, cool. That's the angle of cash flow you're taking, not the angle that everybody thinks. So I think it's a very
yeah.
interesting concept.
I think it's difficult for people because what it is, it's the journey of an entrepreneur. Because a lot of people, very much like what you do here, a lot of people don't always start in the place where they land. It's a set of circumstances. It's going through the left door when you're meant to go through the right door. It's going on the tube when you're meant to go on the train, and then you bump into somebody and so on. It's like when, meeting you, we both end up in the same situation. And then obviously here we are X amount of time forward on each other's shows, etc., etc. And that's how you work but you have to be in the moment at the right time. You have to take that business card. You have to connect with that person. Because I think that's another tip I've learned in business. Too many people get great opportunities and then waste them. This is the bit I don't. Every time you get a business card or you say you're going to connect with somebody, even if it's just the one message, connect with that person, because you're taking money and you're literally throwing out the window. And unless you're P. Diddy, unless you're, 50 Cent, you can't afford to throw money out the window like that. You're not doing yourself a disservice. I follow up with every single person that I meet, even if it's just to say, I'm connected with you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. That's what networking people should be doing, and I did that, in my earlier years of networking as well. Every business card, even when I didn't understand networking properly, even I'll just email them, connect to them LinkedIn, hey, da, 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 you know, but at least I did it. At least I was active about it, not passive.
Yes, you've got to be. And I think that's why my tip for a lot of business people is that business is about knowing people. It's about that connection. There's an English saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And my Jamaican parents always used to say, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
I like that one. I love that
you know,
one.
and because you might know somebody, but whether they acknowledge you on the same level will determine the way that the relationship goes. I know a lot of people. A lot of people say, "Oh, I know your name. Oh, I recognize your face." Does that necessarily translate into business? Not always. But the
Clayton,
fact is, I've done enough to be able to make myself known. And the fact is, and also to maintain your reputation of doing what you say you can do.
wow. This has been a powerful session. I must honestly say this has been powerful. You're definitely now officially in the Quit and Switch Hall of Fame, Clayton. You've definitely given listeners, some advice, especially small businesses out there, small to medium businesses out there. That's your advice. If you want any advice, Clayton's just giving you a couple of golden nuggets for you to take away. No pun intended to Denver Nuggets, who just won the NBA championships. So let's move on to my brand new segment. So Clayton, we've got a brand new segment here on Quit and Switch called Quit Playing Small. Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm going to throw this question out to you. So of course you're established in debt prevention and podcasting. You've been podcasting a little bit longer than me, I must say. If time, resources, that is money, and effort was not an object for you, what new business, industry, or career would you go into?
Women's underwear.
Wow. Did not expect that. Why?
Because A, it never goes out of fashion. B, you've got a willing base. And C, there's money in it.
True. It's always the everyday. This is interesting because I've asked other guests this question, and most of them refer to products or services which the everyday person needs. And
Yeah.
businesses are not always these type of businesses which make the most money, which my other guest Adrian talked about. He said these businesses are usually the most boring ones. They're not always the most exciting ones. Understand? So you think about underwear, oh, it's boring. Who will sell underwear? I want to be a startup and, be in San Francisco and, sell iPhones, whatever it is. This is the everyday stuff that people need. And as crazy as it sounds, it can make money.
Listen, the people are often swayed by things just because of they're shiny and bright. The fact is, unfortunately, whether people like it or not, whether you're an OnlyFans model or you are living in a nunnery or whatever the case may be, you're going to need underwear.
True.
It's just a different scale.
It's true.
People would look at me and think it's crazy, but it's not. It's just very simple. It's just the fact of something that doesn't go out of fashion, something that maintains that particular consistency, that it maintains the cash flow, because you could always sell a different type of underwear for a different type of occasion.
You're right.
I mean, you have to go back. Marks and Spencers, really, in the old days of, Marks and Spencers in the 60s and 70s was the place where people went for underwear. And I don't want to say, so take your show down to a particular edition, but it shows you there was one particular place where people knew that place was the place that you went. And that's what they originally sold so much of. Until now,
Wow.
when they started getting into food, and food is what they're selling now. But in terms of
Yeah.
the clothes, Marks and Spencer's underwear was seen as completely solid. It was as well designed, good materials, lasted a long time, and they literally, old school people. If you speak to any old school people or old school relatives and ask them about Marks and Spencer's underwear, they'll tell you that because
Wow.
they had that market, no pun intended, all sewn up. They were running that thing like it was a monopoly. They were running it like that
Mm,
because everybody
mm.
just knew that on the tip of their tongue that was the place that you went.
Amazing. Amazing. It's interesting,
So
but I think the theme here is Marks and Spencer's is, even to this day, they're known for quality, right? So
correct.
now they're more known for food these days, over other products, where they do still sell fashion, which is good. But back then they were more into like underwear, which you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they sold a variety of things, but when you said Marks and Spencers, the initial response would have been underwear.
Never would
So
have imagined that.
yeah, but as I said, things change, and when obviously cheaper brands came in and whatever and competed with that, they found it very difficult to compete with the Primarks, etc., and the Peacocks and all those other kind of shops that were basically necessarily undercutting them by going abroad.
Mm,
So ultimately, what people don't understand is that it's nice having a sexy startup and, oh, we're doing this and we're doing an AI version of of opening a can of beer or whatever, or an AI beer, or we're doing a beer that it turns into whatever flavor that you want it to, blah blah blah. It sounds great and it sounds fantastic and it's exciting, and everybody will be meeting up and they'll be having a team huddle and all this kind of this, and it sounds great. But if you say, listen, we're just going to make good quality underwear, we're going to get people to buy, we've got a captive market, we'll send out samples, blah blah blah, people try it, they love it, boom, we're off.
excellent. This has been excellent, Clayton. Really, it really has been. So, Clayton, I'd like you to tell our quit and switchers out there where they can listen to the Cashflow podcast. And if you have any final thoughts, please do share them with the listeners, and also where they can connect with you online.
Right, thank you very much for that. In the first instance, I can always be found on LinkedIn. I'm Clayton M Coke. I think there's only 3 Clayton Cokes on LinkedIn, full stop. So
Exclusive,
I'm pretty,
exclusive.
yes, I'm pretty fair. I think, and I'm the only black guy, so as Clayton Coke. So I'm pretty easy to find. So that's no problem. So LinkedIn is your first port of call. You can also go to our website, www.prmsltd.co.uk. That's www.prmsltd.co.uk. As far as the podcast is concerned, it's the Cashflow Show. That's it, nothing else. The easiest way to find that, you can actually go to our website, thecashflowshowpodcast.com. That's the cashflowshowpodcast.com, all one word. And you can listen to episodes there, and you can find out a bit about what we do. You can sponsor us there or denote to the podcast. So there's options there for you. We're on socials. If you're on Twitter and Instagram, PRMS LTD for both of those. If you are on Twitter and Instagram, again, for the Cashflow Show, it's either the Cashflow Show podcast or the Cashflow Show, and you should be able to find it. If you have any problems with socials, go onto our website and you will see that link to the socials there, and that's probably where you can find us in both of those areas.
Amazing, Clayton. Don't worry, listeners. Quit and switches. We'll have all the links, references, nuggets, and the transcripts in the show notes. quitandswitch.co/Clayton Coke. That's CLAYTONCOKE. Clayton, that's been fantastic. It's been fantastic having you on board. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I enjoy your podcast as well. Wishing you all the best with your podcast. I enjoy listening to the business jet engine episode that you did with a business owner, and he left a very actionable insight that listeners could take. So yeah, please do go check out Clayton's podcast, guys. If you're listening, you will not be disappointed. And he's got a very, very good podcast voice, I must say. So and please do go and leave him a review. Go and leave him a review as well. So make sure I have links to his podcast in the description. Clayton, I'm gonna leave you to go and chase some depths. I know you've got a long day ahead of you. But listen, you're legend to your game. It's clear that you've found what you're locked into for the rest of your life as Godfather, as you mentioned earlier on, which is debt prevention and podcasting. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon. I really appreciate
Most
you having on
definitely. Thank you ever so much for inviting me on the show. And Quit and Switchers, enjoy the knowledge that Adrian is putting forward for you, because I think this is a great opportunity for everybody to learn, and he's doing a sterling job of getting people involved and sharing this with you. And keep supporting him. He needs that support. We all need that support, but he needs it just as much. So be there for him.
I appreciate it, Clayton. All right, guys, until next episode, quitters never really quit, they switch. See you next time. Bye-bye.